I'm so glad that you are all here. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to record this, so if any of you ask questions, I will repeat the question into the microphone. I'm Lori Butterworth. I know all of you. I'm the founder and executive director of Jacob's Heart. I'm also the co-founder of the Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition. What this training is about is helping our volunteers and our teams and our partners and our board understand the whole scope of hospice, palliative care, and bereavement, and how Jacob's Heart fits in and how we partner with that, what kinds of services we provide. So some of this information is a little difficult. All of you have been volunteers here at Jacob's Heart for quite some time, and so you very much are the most prepared for having some of these conversations. So we're going to go over the history of Jacob's Heart. All of you know the history of Jacob's Heart, but I'm going to tell you some of the stories about the beginning of Jacob's Heart that will put into context the principles of palliative care and bereavement and the family-centered services. So you'll hear another kind of a version of our history that will help you understand the philosophy behind the palliative care and bereavement services that we provide. So people have requested sort of a history of hospice in the United States. Some of you have volunteered at hospice as well, but I'll focus specifically on hospice for children and how that movement has gone about in the U.S. and how it affects our children that we serve at Jacob's Heart. And then we'll define some terms, and we'll talk about grief and loss and how we navigate grief and loss with families here at Jacob's Heart. And then we'll take some time at the end for some questions, comments, and I'd like to hear from people about their responses to this. And then if you are ever in need of support or have a question, just feel free to ask any of us. So I want to acknowledge that the Jacob's Heart staff, all of our staff members, recently received 5 scholarships to go to an intensive training. You guys might remember when a lot of us were gone at this training. It's the End-of-Life Nursing Education Consortium training, so our bilingual, bicultural staff, as well as some of the family members who work here, were able to be trained in this. So a lot of the concepts and the things that I'll be sharing with you today are from that training. I was trained as a trainer I have my thing on the wall over there, you can see it, when I got the award for palliative care, and also was trained as a trainer back in, I think, 2007. But the curriculum has been so enriched, and every time we go, you learn so much more. So I would recommend if any of you can ever go. It's really a valuable, valuable training. Okay, so let's start talking about palliative care and hospice. Okay, first of all, hospice, I'll look on with you here, Lorraine. Okay, so we asked the question, what is hospice? And just to be clear, Jacob's Heart do you guys know, I would ask you, do you know if Jacob's Heart provides hospice care? What would you guess?
I don't know.
No, right, no, we don't provide hospice care, because in order to provide hospice care, you are a licensed hospice, and hospice is a benefit for the terminally ill. That is really the key to hospice. And it's a whole philosophy of care, family-centered care that looks at the whole patient, mind, body, and spirit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that philosophy. But we don't provide hospice care. We work with hospices for integrating services when there's a loss of a child. So now palliative care, so people get those kind of mixed up, like what's the difference between hospice and palliative care? So for palliative care, there are different definitions. We here at Jacob's Heart use the definition by the American Academy of Pediatrics. That is the definition that we use. And I will give you the whole 2-page definition of pediatric palliative care. So Jacob's Heart does provide palliative care. Palliative care, there's a clinical piece of palliative care, which is nursing care. Do we do that? No, but there's also that care is integrated with the psychosocial, emotional, and family support, the practical support. You'll see in the American Academy of Pediatrics definition of palliative care that it talks about it's care that's integrated, spiritual support, psychosocial support, emotional support, and practical support. A lot of you have done the grocery deliveries. That's practical support. Something that people don't know is any service can really be palliative. as long as it's integrated into a philosophy. Palliative care is a philosophy of care. Both hospice and palliative care are concepts, philosophies. Hospice is not a place. Palliative care is not like one thing. It's a philosophy of care. It came from the whole idea of a cloak. Kind of, so you could picture a cloak going around an entire family. It's family-centered. Let's look at the definition. Sorry about that. Okay. So it's broader than hospice. It can be used in any stage of the illness. And it is designed, this is key, it is designed to meet the unique and special needs of children, for pediatrics, children living with a life-threatening condition. Okay, it's not just associated with death. Okay? It recognizes that everyone in the family is affected. You notice that here. And one of the goals of palliative care is to improve the quality of life for the family. That definition of pediatric palliative care came out a few years ago. That's been our mission statement at Jacob's Heart since 1998. So yeah. So it's that we knew, and so when we were talking about the history of Jacob's Heart, I'll share with you a piece of the history of Jacob that you may not know. All these years being here, that just recently I had a conversation with Jacob about his memories when he was 5 years old in the hospital. And people would bring him toys, and people would bring him, things to make him feel better. People always assume that a stuffed animal, we're not really all that into so many stuffed animals here. We're more into practical support for families, because what Jacob said, even back in 1998, was what he worried most about was his family. 5 years old, he worried about his family. And it was of great comfort to him, even at 5 years old, when we came and supported his mother. He said, "You were the first person that came and said, that want to take care of my mother," and he remembers feeling a sense of relief. So that, at 5 years old, yeah, that is really one of the concepts, the key concepts of palliative care, is family-centered care. And we can really understand it from a child's perspective, because we know here that what a child needs more than any toy, anything, is a strong, informed family to be there for their care. So all of the programs that we have here, you'll notice that they support the family through the all the way through the journey. The other thing about palliative care is it needs to be introduced at the time of diagnosis. Okay, when we talk about hospice in a minute, you'll understand why this mindset of waiting until someone's dying to think about hospice, waiting until someone's dying to think about palliative care, is not the concept of palliative care. We have those conversations, we integrate those services all the way through. So at Jacob's Heart, there's another boy, you'll see his picture in the Hall of Fame. And we were in existence for probably 2 or 3 years. So it was about 2001 when we got a referral for this young man who lived in Watsonville, 13 years old, oldest of 13 children. Both of his parents were farm workers. And the social worker at the hospital said, "We have this child who lives in your service area. They really need support. They don't have a car. They didn't have a way to get back and forth to the hospital." We're all nodding our heads. We're familiar with that. And he never smiles. This boy is just shut down. He won't communicate with us. He won't talk to us. He never smiles. And so I went and picked him up and met them and brought him home and took him to they lived in one of the farm worker camps nearby here. All the kids came out when he came home. He was smiling from ear to ear. There's a picture on that slide of him standing at his house with a big smile on his face. I sent that to the social workers and they couldn't believe it. They said that is not the same kid. What we learned from that is that children want to be home as much as possible, especially when their lives are short. So his disease progressed faster than they could cure it. And it was progressing and progressing and progressing. He had osteosarcoma, which some of you are familiar with. It's a very, very aggressive bone cancer. And he was in terrible pain. So I called Hospice to see if they could come to their home in Watsonville and provide services. And they said, "You can't make a hospice referral." And I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about it. And so I said, "Why?" And they said, "It has to come from a doctor," right? So I didn't know. So, okay, sure. So I understand. I called the doctor, and the doctors in the hospice agreed that he didn't qualify. And I thought, why? I didn't know why, but what I do know is that 3 days later, he died after calling 911 and being rushed to the emergency room at the local hospital here, where nobody knew about his care. And I was absolutely livid. And so about that time, I met Devin Dabbs, who we co-founded the Children's Hospice and Palliative Care Coalition. It was actually on September 11th, 2001, when the planes hit the buildings, that we had a conversation in the parking lot of our children's school. And I shared with her, I get emotional telling the story, I shared with her what had happened to this boy and how horrible it was. I don't understand why children don't qualify for hospice. So we decided to look into it. So we got online and we learned a lot about how the hospice how hospice evolved in the United States. So I'd like to share a little bit about that history, and then we can figure out what was wrong, okay? So first of all, hospice started it started a long time ago, but the first hospice that we have in our hospice history was Dame Cicely Saunders, and it started in the UK. And it was 1967, I think. You can look at your slides. And she started this hospice, and the whole idea was we know, as we know of hospice now, it's looking at a patient, the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, and it's all about family and what's important to that patient. Wonderful, beautiful way to do care for people. So Dame Cicely was invited by Florence Wald, who was have you heard of her? She was, she was the director of nursing at Yale University. She invited Dame Cicely out and was so moved by her talk and really loved this kind of care that she started the first hospice in the United States in Connecticut. And so what people don't really know is that first hospice was started by Nurse Wald, a chaplain, and 2 pediatricians. So 2 pediatricians were the doctors that started the first hospice. And then you fast forward a little bit, and they were trying to figure out, how do we get this service paid for by Medicare? Because we want to make this available to more people. So that was the intention. So finally, after a couple of attempts, Congress in 1982 passed the first Medicare provision for hospice. And they thought, well, how do we define who gets this care? Because you have to have some kind of limitations, right? So they looked at adults with cancer, and they thought, okay, the trajectory of a typical adult cancer patient this is how it goes. So they decided that that the doctor and the patient would agree that if the disease progressed as expected, they would anticipate 6 months or less to live. So that was the first provision. And then the other provision was that patient would have to give up curative therapies. You're all nodding your heads because you're familiar with this. Yeah, for cancer, it would be aggressive chemotherapy, radiation therapy that's intended to cure your disease or prolong your life. Okay, so here Devin and I were back in 2001, and we're looking at this, and of course, it dawned on me, oh, that doesn't work for children, because the parents are the ones making the decisions. So at the same time, that was 2001, at the same time, the Institute of Medicine was doing research on this and finding that about 1% of children who needed hospice got it at that point. And in 2002, they released a groundbreaking study which just put it out there. The Institute of Medicine put this study out. It's called When Children Die. And it changed everything. It said, and there's text in there, you guys have copies of this, where it said that the way the hospice benefit is designed presents cruel choices for parents when it's for children. And it makes perfect sense. So fast forward, there's a lot more history about this, but we fast forward to there's a picture over there, some of you were looking at the signing of the bill in 2006, which that was a bill that Governor Schwarzenegger signed into law that allowed California to implement a waiver. And a waiver basically is a federal provision that you can try something different. And so we got this time frame to try something different, where we would essentially provide palliative and hospice care services to children without a time frame and without having to give up their diseases, their life-enhancing medications. So that's called the Partners for Children waiver. You'll hear about that, and there's more about that and information you can look up and learn about. It's available in 9 counties right now in California. Santa Cruz, Monterey, and Santa Clara counties are 3 of those 9 counties that are participating in this program. The service provider, the medical provider that provides the services, is Coastal Kids Home Care. You know them. We work really closely with them. They do the in-home nursing and the waiver services. And we work closely with them to enhance those services for the other pieces of the social, emotional, practical support that Jacob's Heart provides. So, but one thing that's one of this wonderful thing, that children have more access to palliative care. However, one thing is they have to qualify, they have to be full scope Medi-Cal. So that means that not every child that needs that gets it still. So there's some more good news, which is, it's all evolving, but there's some more good news. In 2010, we worked with several people from around the country to develop a provision in the Affordable Care Act. It's provision 2302. And it's revolutionary. It's a teeny tiny piece of that big bill, right? Yeah. So but 2302. Are you ready for this? Allows for children to receive curative and life prolonging therapies and hospice at the same time. That's huge. Yeah. It's huge. But there's one problem with it. They did not remove the 6-month death prognosis. So hospice for children is still a limited life expectancy. But they do get to continue with their life enhancing. And some children graduate off. Yeah. And then you have to re-enroll them. So we have these options here that we can, if we have a child we think is appropriate for one of these programs, we can make some calls and help, like do the concurrent care for hospices so they're more inclined to take care of children. Or we can work with Coastal Kids to have the children on the palliative care waiver. So those are pretty amazing things that have happened. In your packets, you'll see there's some charts about the first one. You see, let's see what slide number it is. Where are we here? Yeah. Oh, here we go. Slide number 12. See that chart where you look at how palliative care and curative care is together in that box on the left. That they are integrated together during the first part, and then you have the hospice box. You can transition to hospice, and then after a death, you see the line of the death, then bereavement starts. The hospice benefit and the Partners for Children benefit allow for a year of bereavement, okay? Which I have very strong opinions about. When you lose a child, a year is nowhere near enough bereavement support. It doesn't even start really well, it does. I mean, it's important to have that year of bereavement, but you'll know that the services, you all know, the services that we provide to families who lose a child lasts a lifetime. Yeah. So I would, someday like to redo that slide. And this is what it looks like for a child. And bereavement is a squiggly line. It's really, really, it's not linear. It doesn't go down the slope like they show. And so a chart like that is really not reflective of what we talk about when we talk about bereavement. So I want to move into telling you about our bereavement services, what we do. Some of you are very familiar with our comprehensive bereavement support. It includes counseling. It includes support groups. Some of those are 8-week thematic support groups that we do in coordination with Hospice of Santa Cruz County for our Santa Cruz County families, and we do with the Cancer Center in Monterey, or in Salinas, and we have partners that we work with, Catholic Charities, a lot of partners that we work with to do our support groups. And then we have a very strong peer mentorship program where we have bereaved family members, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, grandparents. When there's a loss of a child, we match them up and we help them they help each other. It's a beautiful, beautiful program. And then we have some traditions and rituals here at Jacob's Heart that have been going on for 17 years that I'll share with you in a moment. But now I want to do some definitions in the world of bereavement. So I want to ask you to get a piece of paper. You have paper there. Just turn one of those over. And I'm going to ask you first, we're going to do this kind of quickly. And I'm going to ask you first to make a list of 5 activities that you enjoy. 5 things you like to do. Okay? I'm going to rush you along a little bit. Now, the next list is 5 things that you cherish or value. And I'm talking about things, not people. Okay? Items.
Not people?
Not people. That comes next.
Still
things, 5 things that you cherish or value. You don't have to overthink it, just things you value, things you like.
And if we can't think of 5, we can quit.
Make them up. You can have Elmo, Norma. Okay, and then the next list, of course, is the 5 most important people in your life. And then the last list is 5 things you look forward to in the future. Okay?
You stumped me on that one.
Okay. It can be going to lunch with Lorraine, Norma.
I always look
Okay.
forward to
Yeah, I know things you look forward to. Okay. All right. 5 things. You got it? Okay, you should have 20 things there. Okay.
I came up short.
Okay, that's okay. All right. So now I want you to just imagine that your child has some flu-like symptoms and it's not going away. You got fever, not going away. You take your child to the pediatrician and they say they're going to do some blood work, and then the blood work comes back and they tell you that they've got to send it up to Stanford for additional tests. I want you to look at your list and take away 3 things. From your list. No, from any of the 20.
Scratch 3 things.
Take away 3 things. Mm-hmm. Just take away 3 things. Okay? You have to drive up to Stanford to have a conversation. They take you into a room, and there's a team of some doctors and some people there, and they sit you down, and they very compassionately tell you that we're sorry, your child has cancer. Take away 3 more things. Scratch them out. And they explain that the treatment for this cancer, it's treatable, it's curable. And they tell you that it's going to take some time, though. So you realize, as they explain, that the next 3 years of your life, a minimum of 3 years, will be all about traveling back and forth from home to the hospital and managing the life of chemotherapy, radiation, and the treatment. So take away 3 more things. And you continue the treatment. You're going through the treatment day after day, up and back. You're getting support. You're getting through it. And they tell you that unfortunately there's a relapse. and they're going to have to take a different kind of approach. So take away 3 more things. And then you find that they tell you that there's really not a lot they can do medically. We're going to focus on quality of life. And you know that the time with your child is short. So that's getting harder and harder, but try to take away 3 more things. And you almost get to a point where you just can't do it, right? Yeah.
Get down off the people.
Yeah. So what that process is, when you took those things away, that is the definition of loss. You're taking something away from life that you love, that you cherish. That's loss. And you had feelings. You had feelings, right? I could see it. That there were feelings about that loss. That's grief. The definition of grief is the response to a loss. It's an emotional response to loss. And every one of us feels grief differently. We feel loss differently. And then that outward expression of that grief, what we do in our family, in our community, in our church, individually. Some people do religious ceremonies, some people pray, some people meditate, some people walk, some people drink. That outward expression is mourning. And you think about mourning, and just for a moment, just think about how individual that is, how personal that is. And there's not a timeline, there's not a right way to do that, there's no formula. It's very, very individual. And all of those things, the loss, the grief, and the mourning, are all part of our bereavement program, right? That's what those are the principles that we hold, that everybody's loss is just unique. But what you'll notice in that activity that we just did, there wasn't a death. The loss and the grief starts early. So we acknowledge that it's not this linear thing that, okay, now we start to talk about loss, right? So that's really a good exercise to really understand the context that we provide our bereavement support through.
Yeah. The same one I did on the hospice.
Yeah. So and you can, the stories can be different. For our purposes, we talk about the childhood cancer, but really in life it's all of those things, right? Yeah. So that's a modification of something that we do in end of life care training at LNEC. We learned that. So when you talk about the loss of a child here, it's a special sorrow. It's a different kind of sorrow. So we design we open our hearts and we design our programs with that in mind. And like I said before, it's not linear. It's not something that's predictable, and there's no right way to do it. We have found that if you just have like a bereavement program where you say, okay, we provide individual counseling, that's what we do. And that's good. That'll meet the needs of certain people, but how do we broaden that? And what we found, I'd like to share this with you because this is really recent, that we've discovered that our support groups at night, it was, I would say, 90, maybe 95% mothers would come to the support groups. The dads would sit in the car. They wouldn't come in. They drop their wives off sometimes. So for all these years, we're thinking, how do we get dads to come? So we just recently started doing the breakfasts across that, we did it in Monterey, we do it at First Tea and at the restaurant down in Salinas, and then there's a restaurant in Monterey, and then there's the California Grill here. So we have these breakfasts for bereaved parents, and we found that it's about 50-50 men and women coming. It works, yeah. So the fathers will come and have breakfast, and sometimes they'll even come without their wives. It's really amazing. And then we provide the art therapy for the kids, for the siblings at the same time, and that just works really well. So that's another like facet of it. And then sometimes it's that one-on-one. We found that sometimes parents will connect with one another at those meetings, and then they become friends. And then we help facilitate that and provide support within that relationship for the peer mentorship. Another thing that we do with the teens, we have, let me just back up and mention, because it's on the slide, about grandparents. We, in the Latino community, we see that there's a lot of support from grandparents, and families are relying on that support from the grandparents. We need to remember at Jacob's Heart that the grief of the grandparents is twofold. They're grieving and worried about their son and daughter, and then their grandchild as well. So let's not forget that. And then when we look at the siblings who lose a sibling, their loss is threefold. They lose their family unit as they had imagined it in life. I remember one of the bereaved siblings, she now serves on our board, said, we went into the hospital a family of 5, and we came out a family of 4. And she said, and I was just a sibling. Sometimes they feel that way about themselves. I'm just a sibling. But she lost her family unit as she knew it. She lost her parents in their grief, and she lost her brother. So we remember that sibling grief is, we need to really acknowledge that. Some of you may have heard the story recently about a young man. They're one of the families that we're still supporting with practical support. His sister died. He was 17 when she died, and he was 17, she was 14, and he felt like it was his responsibility to protect his little sister.
To do what?
To protect her. Yeah, to protect her. And so he felt like he had failed. And he shut himself down. He would go in the room and turn on the loud music and would not talk to anyone. So here is his mom and dad, grieving the loss of their daughter and worried about the son. And of course, he started hanging out with the wrong people. So we kept trying to intervene with a peer mentor who had nothing to do with it. Let's do counseling, nothing to do with it. It was about a year before one time he answered the phone, and it was our other Norma inviting him to go to the boardwalk. They were going to do an outing for the bereaved siblings. And he paused, thought for a moment, said, I've never been to the boardwalk. And he went. We were so, so happy that he finally would go. And the way we set that up is it's all other teens who have lost a sibling, and then the chaperones are adults who have lost a sibling when they were young. So and they have a good time. And that was the feedback from him was that he didn't ever realize that he was allowed to have fun. And so then you can see how then it can start. We can start to really support him.
Well, and so many other kids don't go through that, so you don't find that peer group very often.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you can't hear on the tape, it's just that you have your peers, and it's the same with parents. You have your peers, and they're your friends, but they don't understand. And there are those special, special relationships with people who share the same experience. They may not socialize at all outside of the Jacob's Heart events, which is fine. But when they're there together, they can, really know that they share that experience. It's a very bonding experience. So that's just sort of that. Those stories give us a framework of the grief support. We're very committed to it. We have families that have been participating for, 17 years, some. Wow. And one mother just shared, it was just the anniversary of her son's death. And she said, every year, about 2 weeks before that date, I feel it in my body. 2 weeks before. I don't even have to look at the calendar. I know it's coming. And it's been 13 years. So being there for her, and one of the really amazing healing things for her is walking through it with other families, other newly bereaved. They'll spend holidays together, the first holiday without their child. And we do in December, every December, we do our candle lighting, which is open to the public, anyone who's lost a child, by any disease, any circumstance, or any age can participate. We do that. It's a program of the Compassionate Friends. So we work really closely with them to do candle lighting service the second Sunday in December. And the families come here, they bring a potluck of their children's favorite food, and they light candles at 7 o'clock. And then when the next time zone comes, the bereaved families' parents in the next time zone will light their candles. It goes around the globe.
Oh my
It's
God.
It's real. And at that, we do those all over our service area. This year, we're hoping to do one in King City. So, but we have it here: Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Monterey, Salinas, and now hopefully King City, where the families just gather, and they know that they're all lighting candles at the same time and that they're going to go around. And then the families meet each other. and decide that that's where the Grief in the Holidays programs start. And you'll see that we're pretty busy around the holidays here, not only with all the programs that we do for our families in treatment, but others. So there's one more thing I want to point out that we do very well here that you'll see, and now it'll start to make a little more sense, is that we do have traditions, rituals, and legacies. You all know, you all worked very closely with Maddie's grandma, and Maddie Buell, she was the first child to die at Jacob's Heart, and she loved to paint clay pots. Yes, yes. And you think about how many clay pots and plants have been planted in her memory over these past years. And you think about what that means to her family. That is a ritual. Rituals don't always just happen in churches. It's a ritual, it's something we do. We do breaking of chocolate chip cookies here. This do in remembrance of me. That is in memory of Marissa. They're the peppermint patties, those little mints. Those are in memory of Samantha. I dress as Glenda. Do you all know why? In memory of Vanessa, who loved The Wizard of Oz, year after year after year. Each of those special things about children, and we've lost 120 children. And every family we sit and think, okay, what is it? You see Derek's Corner over here. It's the sharing of toys with others. Some of it's reading a book, some of it's rainbows. There's all these different things that we do in remembrance of me. Those are rituals, those are legacies, and those are the traditions that we hold very safely and closely here with Jacob's Heart. You'll see some of these on these quilts. Those are the traditions, and that's part of our bereavement program. So I thank you for, do you have any comments, questions? There's
a lot
resources
involved. How do you,
I didn't have
much
time to
more
take
than I
notes.
realized.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to turn off and thank you if you want to talk a little bit